Hello, everybody. For those of you who just came in, I'm Linda Abraham, President and Founder of Accepted. I'm moderating today's webinar, How to Create Successful Secondary Applications, which will be presented by Accepted consultant Alicia McNeese-Namankar. If you have not yet downloaded your worksheet, you can find it on your dashboard in the worksheet area of the handout area rather of the dashboard. And what I like to recommend is that you actually download it, print it out, and use it for taking notes. I think that's the best way to use it. And I think it'll help you see also the structure that Alicia has created for this webinar. Hand raising. You can raise your hand. We're going to ask at certain points of the webinar for you to raise your hand. You can raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon, two icons underneath the horizontal orange arrow on your control panel. I once heard from a participant in the webinar that he was waving his hand in front of the screen. That will not do anything. You need to click on the hand icon if I ask you to raise your hand. And I'm going to right now put down your hands. And I'm going to, let's test this capability, okay? Raise your hand if you are attending this webinar because you want to become a physician, your dream career. So please raise your hand if you want to become a physician and that's your dream career. All right, yep, most of you did find the hand icon and also are here for the right reason, which is that you want to become a physician. Okay, great, thank you very much. Some of you are also going to wonder if we're recording this. Yes, we are, and you will be notified when the recording is live. And the last thing I want to mention is that we're going to announce a special discount today for webinar registrants. But rather than have you anxiously waiting to find out what it is until the end of the webinar, I'm going to reduce your anxiety levels and tell you right now. It should be on your screen, actually. It's $100 off any order, any of our services over $1,250. The coupon code is SUCCESS, and it ends July 13th. Now, today is July 10th. So you have until Friday. One-time use, and the URL, as you see, is accepted.com/secondary. We'll be repeating this offer at the end. Now, before I get started and actually introduce Alicia, I do have a couple of questions for you. And we're going to use the question window for your questions as well as for your answers. So right now in the question window, if you could tell me where you are located, city and state if you are in the United States, city and country if you're outside the United States. Virginia Beach, Florida, Chicago, Illinois, New York, Boca Raton, San Diego, we're getting close, Austin, Texas, Oakland, California, San Diego, California, a lot of Californians, Dayton, Ohio, Rochester, New York, Los Angeles, California, a neighbor, New Jersey, Long Island, Champaign, Illinois, Oxford, Mississippi, Rexburg, Idaho, San Diego, Conway, Arkansas, Spokane, Washington, Louisiana, Dallas, it's either Louisiana or Los Angeles, I'm not sure which. Buena Park, that's pretty close. Los Angeles, Santa Monica, California. Okay, lived there for several years. Anybody in Boston? That's where Alicia is. I didn't see Chicago. No. Okay, all right, that's great. So we've got a pretty, all around the country really, diverse crowd. And now I'd like to know, where are you at in the application process? We'll see that in a minute. The options are: haven't submitted your primary applications, submitted the primary but haven't received any secondaries, or have started receiving secondary applications. And we have there's a clear leader in the crowd here. Let's see, we're at 63% having voted. Let's get it up. Can we have more votes here? Again, the options are: haven't submitted the primary, submitted the primary but haven't received secondaries, have started receiving secondary applications. I'm going to close the poll and share the poll with, I think it's 76% having voted, 23% haven't submitted the primary yet, 18% have submitted the primary but haven't received secondaries, and 59% have started receiving secondaries. So this is very, very relevant for you. Okay, that's actually pretty interesting. Just going to make a note of this. All right, and then the next poll is: are you a first-time applicant or reapplicant? Great, we're at 80% having voted. I'm going to share the results. 82% are first-time applicants and 18% are reapplicants. Okay, that's kind of interesting. Okay, thank you. Let me just hide it now. And I'm thrilled to introduce Alicia McNeish-Nemankar, who will present how to create successful secondary applications. Alicia started advising clients in 2012. She immediately was earning rave reviews from her clients. Prior to joining Accepted, she both evaluated applications and advised med school applicants as director of the UC Davis Postbac program. She brings enormous insight and experience with the medical school application process to our webinar today. And I'm going to be quiet now and let Alicia present how to create successful secondary applications.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. So I have one more poll for you before we actually get started. So for those of you listening, how many people have completed secondary application essays before? If you could give us a show of hands.
Okay, let's see. I'm getting over here.
To 18%, right?
Yeah, I would assume so. And it's 16%, so it's pretty close. Yeah. Okay.
And the question I have for you for the poll is, for those of you who have submitted secondaries, what did you learn about the experience? So this is for the benefit of our first-time applicants. So what could you have done better?
Okay, here, I guess here's the poll. What was a challenge you faced, right? Processing the secondaries quickly, the sheer volume of secondaries, the number of secondaries, not knowing what to write, rewriting essays, and still keeping them. Okay, I think you have to choose the one that's most relevant to you. I think we're actually getting the people who are filling out the secondaries now are also voting. That's okay too, whichever you're finding most challenging.
Yeah, that's helpful.
That's also helpful. All right. So, okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to close the poll and share the poll. So 24% are finding the processing to be most difficult, just keeping up with them. 13% the sheer volume of secondaries, the number of secondaries. 37% not knowing what to write, and 26% rewriting and keeping them fresh.
Yeah, okay, excellent. This is very helpful. Thank you all for participating in that poll. Yeah. So, for those of you who are new to the process, secondary application invitations are sent out after medical schools have received your AMCAS primary application. This year, I'm noticing that students are receiving them about 2 weeks after their primary has been processed. In the last 3 years, students were getting them as soon as they submitted the primary. So it's nice that you have a little bit of breathing room this year. There's been about a 2-week difference between the date you submit the primary and the date you start receiving them. Secondary applications typically contain anywhere from 1 long essay to 5 short essays on average, but there can be more, as many of you already know. Secondaries allow the school to learn more about you as an applicant and to find out how much you know about them and their school. They often give you a chance to update the school on your current activities or recent publications. But basically, they want to know what you're doing while you're applying to medical school, and actions speak louder than words. Letters you're going to be very, very happy to know, for those of you who haven't submitted yet, letters of recommendation are due by the secondary applications deadline for school. So I'm going to repeat that. Letters of recommendation are due with secondary applications. But it is good to get them right as soon as you submit the primary, so that you have them available and ready to go as soon as you're going to submit your first secondary. There are 3 types of secondary applications. The 3 types are automatic, manual, and the newest version is the CASPER. So with automatic secondaries, these are sent, as the name implies, automatically to you by schools before they have looked at your application. So you'll know if a secondary is automatic because you'll receive them so quickly. So Tufts often sends them. They're usually one of the first schools. George Washington, both of those schools send out automatic secondaries. What they do is they set limits for acceptable GPAs and MCAT scores, and they use a computer screening system to screen for those scores and to screen those applications out that don't meet their basic requirements. And so, their system generates the secondary invitation. It is a money-making industry. So, of course, right, they want to send out as many secondaries as they can because they get money each time a student returns those. The exception to automatic secondaries are applicants applying as disadvantaged. So students who are applying as a disadvantaged applicant, most schools like UC Davis School of Medicine, they have a policy that those applications will be reviewed by a person before that application is rejected. So the only exception to automatic secondaries, being screened out for automatic secondaries, would be students applying as disadvantaged. So the second type of secondary are manual. And manual secondaries means that it's a much bigger complement to receive it because your application has actually been screened by a person before this invitation has been sent out. So the school is demonstrating genuine interest in you as an applicant. There are fewer manual secondaries sent out, and you'll know which ones they are because they're going to be the ones that will arrive later, usually 4 to 6 weeks after your application has been processed, or longer, depending on how many people they have reviewing applications and how quickly they can get through them. The third and newest form of secondary application is the CASPR. This CASPR is offered at actually it's required now by multiple medical schools. So NYU Medical School, Robert Wood Johnson are just a couple of the schools that require the CASPR. It's a timed, computer-based situational test where you have 90 minutes to respond to different pieces of text, videos, images, and they want to get to your genuine response. So you have a very short amount of time to respond to each one. So if you are a fast typer, that will come in very handy here. But if you are someone who types very slowly, that could hurt your CASPR score. But they do want to evaluate your core personal characteristics based on your responses to the text, to the videos, to the images. And they do want to see, right, that you meet basic requirements in professionalism, ethics, empathy, compassion, and cultural sensitivity. The nice thing about the CASPR is that you can take it anywhere that you have access to a computer with audio and a reliable internet connection. And they do have set test dates, and you have to register for a set. So CASPR is a series of hypothetical everyday situations. So they will ask you what you would do in certain ethical scenarios. There's no way to really study for this exam, but for fun, you could look at medical ethics questions, or you could even pose everyday kind of ethical situations to sort of play around with how you would respond to complex situations. So the nice thing is that there's no studying required. Next, we're going to talk about the timeline for secondary applications. So automatic secondaries can arrive as early as 2 weeks after your AMCAS application has been verified, and sooner than that for some schools like Tufts and George Washington. You can be hand-selected for secondary invitations, and those manual secondaries will take weeks longer for you to receive, typically 4 to 6 weeks after the application is verified. It's best to submit secondary applications within 2 weeks of receiving them. And I'm going to repeat that, because if that's the one thing that you take away from this webinar, I will be happy that I did my job. So you'll want to submit all secondary applications within 2 weeks of receiving them. So if you can imagine, there are administrators waiting patiently in admissions offices to fill their interview schedules. They're just waiting to get enough people to call to put on their interview schedule. So I've had students return secondaries within a week last cycle, and those students, it was extraordinary to see how many more interviews they got. So the sooner you can submit them, the better. I did have a student last cycle who was looking to work with us, and I provided a consultation for her. And she had been rejected the previous cycle because I went through her entire application. The only reason she was rejected, she had strong numbers, strong scores, she had excellent letters of recommendation, she had fantastic activities, her essays were strong. The only possible thing we could identify was that she took months to return secondaries. Sometimes she took 2 or 3 months to return each one. And that's a major, major no-no. Because if you can imagine, right, that administrator is sitting there desperately trying to fill the interview schedule, and they're just waiting to get enough people to submit their secondaries early enough that they can fill their earliest interview date. So if you can return your secondaries within a week or 2 weeks, right, you're much more likely to get an interview. They're going to be much more forgiving, right, and much easier on those earliest secondaries because they're going to be desperate to fill their schedule, because most people take much longer to get them back. Are there any questions about anything we've covered so far?
Yeah, if you have any questions, please post them in the question window. Alicia, there are a couple of questions. The first one is from Kristen. When a school requires Casper, do they also have other secondaries?
So for the ones that I gave as examples, those schools only require the Casper. So
they're completely replacing secondaries with the Casper.
Just a few schools are doing that. There are schools that require both. And then some schools, don't use it. Most schools don't use the Casper at all.
All right. And then somebody else is asking, what if you haven't taken the MCAT? Do you still submit your secondary? You won't get verified.
Yeah, so it'll say score pending if you haven't taken the MCAT. But what'll happen is that some schools will, most schools will put your application aside until you have that score. If you have a previous score, they might use that previous score to move your application forward. But if you have a pending score with no previous MCAT, that could hold up your application. It'll be sort of sitting in limbo until that score posts, and then they can evaluate it.
Okay. Kathleen is asking, does Casper need to be done in 2 weeks as well?
No, so Casper has set dates, and you'll sign up for a date to take the Casper after you get the invitation from the school. And you'll see, right, more and more schools each year, and more schools are accepting Casper scores. Some schools have it as an optional thing that you can do. Other schools, it's the only thing required, and then, some schools require both regular secondaries and the Casper. So you'll notice, right, there are more and more schools that are accepting the Casper on an optional basis.
All right, then we have a question here. If I'm waiting on LORs, letters of recommendation, is there any benefit to submitting my secondaries before the letters are received?
No, actually, because keep in mind, letters of recommendation are due with the secondary application. If you do not have your letters of recommendation, that's going to hold your secondary applications back, right? It's not going to be complete until those letters also arrive.
Okay, we'll take 2 more questions, and then we'll move on and take questions at the end also. If you took Casper last cycle, should you retake it this cycle?
Yes, yeah. They're going to be changing the questions from year to year.
Okay, and then this is a question that comes up a lot. Can you submit your application without your previous MCAT score being used? I'm waiting on my new MCAT. So
that's a very interesting question. It makes me wonder what happened with that MCAT score, right?
Well, obviously the taker wasn't happy with it, but let's
yeah.
I mean, we get this question a lot, right? So somebody has an MCAT either from previous cycle or just earlier this year. They aren't happy with it. They just retook it. They're going to get the score, let's say in late July or August. Do they apply now and risk having the application evaluated with the existing MCAT score? Is there any way to remove the earlier MCAT score, or do they wait for the second MCAT score to come through? What's your suggestion on that one?
So you have to include all scores, right? So there's no way to get around. There's no way to sweep that score under the rug, I'm sorry to say, as much as you want to, right? So you'll have to include all scores. And the thing is, as long as your new score demonstrates improvement, that will actually be to your advantage. The fact that you've taken the MCAT twice shows a lot of determination. And if your score improves, that's only going to help you, and it's only going to demonstrate how much you are able to improve, how much you have honed your skills, whether you've improved your knowledge, your approach, your test-taking skills, your study skills. It's just going to look good. It's only going to help if you improve your score. On the other hand, it's a bit of a wild card to submit your MCAS application with a pending MCAT score. And I recommend students wait to get their score, but you know yourself best. So if you're somebody who thrives under enormous pressure, maybe that additional pressure will help you get a better MCAT score. But I know for some students who know themselves well, right, that may rattle them or make it harder for them to get a good score. So I think it's always better, of course, to have your score in your hand whenever possible. But if you are submitting, that's a risk you're taking. That yes, they'll probably review the prior score. If you're postponing the MCAT, if you're scheduled to take it soon, that should help you. But if you keep putting off the MCAT, if you put it off till September, your applications again is going to be in limbo. And they may just use your prior score if it takes too long for them to get the second or the new score.
Okay, great. Let's continue, and we'll have more time for questions at the end, okay?
Yep, okay. So moving on, we're going to talk about how to maximize your strategy in approaching these secondaries. So I know 59% of you are probably really stressed out because you've got a lot of secondary applications to work on. So start early, right? The day you get a secondary, right, don't just put it in your email box. Don't look at it because it's, oh my gosh, it's the 15th one, right? The thing is, your brain is such an amazing, remarkable machine. And as soon as you get a secondary, day one, read all the questions, because your brain, right, just allow those questions to sit in your back burner. If you're not able to work on it that day, start thinking, right? Just put it in your back burner and start thinking about ways you could approach each of those questions. So starting early is really the best way to keep yourself on track. So read the questions as soon as you get them. Get started outlining them as early as possible, right? So we have posts available. So for students who haven't yet received secondaries, you can already start outlining and writing your drafts. In fact, the students that I've seen be most successful are those who start working with me in the fall to put together their primary application. And then by January and all the way into the spring, we're already outlining, discussing, editing, finalizing their secondaries before they even submit the primary. And that's a much more fun situation to be in, and it's a much more relaxing position to be in because you'll have everything ready to go. And the essays do not change very much from year to year. I've never seen a school change all of the questions on a secondary. I've seen them change maybe they'll delete one, maybe they'll add a question, or maybe they'll replace a question or two maximum. But I've never seen all the questions on the secondary change within a year. So luckily for you, on the accepted.com website, we have secondary essay questions and tip posts available, and you can download those for free by registering on our site. And we provide the questions for the secondaries listed, as well as strategies on how to approach each question. After completing application materials for your primary, right, if you can, begin before you even start receiving secondaries to work on those essays, especially for your top choice schools. I have created an Excel spreadsheet for you to use to track your progress. We're going to post that on the accepted.com blog in the next day or two, and I've provided an actual spreadsheet that's formatted for you to use, along with some tips about how to use it. So one of the best ways to maintain a big picture perspective, because it's very easy to get lost in the details of each essay, but to maintain that bigger picture perspective, use this Excel spreadsheet to list. I've included space for multiple school systems, because I do have some students applying to AMCAS, AACOMAS, and TMDSAS. And you'll want to include the school name, the date you submitted the primary. For example, on the AMCAS application, you can submit your application to one school, and then you can always add more schools at a later date. So maybe your submission date isn't going to be the same for each school. So you include the date you submitted the primary, the date that you received the secondary invitation, and then the category that's most important and should be most colorful will be the date that you return the secondary. I've put a note in the spreadsheet, right, to remind you to make sure you return all secondaries in 2 weeks of receiving them, or less, right, or less. And what you can do is color code those dates, right? You can put the dates, the ones that you returned early, like before the 2-week deadline, you could put, in green. The ones you returned, by the 2-week deadline, in pink. The ones you returned after the deadline, maybe red, or whatever colors work for you. But often using a color-coded system can help you quickly, easily see whether you're staying on track for most, some, or all of the schools. So this will help you keep track of your progress for all schools, and most importantly, to stay focused and keep your eye on the prize while you're trying to get so many of these essays done. And for those of you who haven't gotten secondaries yet, or you're first-time applicants, if you apply on average to 20 schools, if each school has 5 essay questions, you're going to be returning about 100 essays. So just keep that in mind, right? So it's almost like a class, right? Applying takes a lot of time. There's a lot of essays to complete. There's a lot of parts to the process. So give yourself enough time. Some students who are working full-time or working multiple jobs, right? I don't think they anticipate how much time these applications are going to take. So make sure, right, to prevent yourself from getting burnt out or feeling overwhelmed or frustrated, that you give yourself enough time to work on these. And a little bit every day really helps. Another successful approach is to work with someone like me or my colleagues at accepted.com. So getting advice and editing assistance on essays from experts can help you improve the quality of your writing and your chances of gaining an interview, right? And we can help you identify what information to include, right? Most of you said, right, the hardest part about secondaries is knowing what to write about. And I agree, right? You're too close to the situation. So one of the things that I absolutely love doing with my clients is outlining secondary applications. Outlines are an easy way to take your writing to the next level, and you wouldn't build a house without a blueprint, would you? The house wouldn't stand. So the same goes for an essay. So I absolutely love working with clients to outline essays, because we get to, I get to ask a lot of questions, and we get to come up with a lot of ideas and choose the best one. And it takes 10 ideas to get to one really good idea. And when you find that one, you get excited to write about it, right? It's going to be easier to write those essays because you know that you're covering something strategic, and it's going to showcase your personality, your best skills, meet the prompt to the best of your abilities. So, consider working with a professional editor or consultant. Now we're going to look at the anatomy of the secondary application itself. So there are 3 basic types of questions that you'll be asked in secondary essays. And for those of you actually in the process, you're going to recognize immediately, right, which ones you have already probably started to write. So the first type of secondary essay would be questions about you. So questions that they have about you. So Baylor has a great example of one of these questions. Their question is, indicate any special experiences, unusual factors, or other information you feel would be helpful in evaluating you, including but not limited to education, employment, extracurricular activities, prevailing over adversity. You may expand upon but not repeat AMCAS application material. So this is a very common question, right? Another example would be challenges that you've overcome, most rewarding experience, any special interest in a particular area in medicine that you have. And then again, this one you'll see frequently, where do you see yourself in 10 years? So sometimes they'll request new information. They'll be asking for updates. They'll ask you to cover what you've been doing, since you graduated, or they'll ask what you're planning on doing in this next year as you apply. Often you can cover events from childhood and on, but sometimes they'll specify, whether they want you to or not. They want to get to know you as a person. So you want to maintain that balance of personal and professional information. You don't want to be too personal, right? But you also don't want to be too professional. So for those of you listening, what kind of information would you include about yourself in these secondary questions?
In the question window, please. What kind of information would you include? Living abroad? Good. Anybody else? Overcoming medical adversity? Okay. Clinical experience? An adversity that I overcame working while in college, helping financially my family.
Yeah.
Family background, cultural identity, and speaking a different language and values you've learned from your family. Coming from a third world country, college athletics. My experiences living in underdeveloped countries. So you have quite a broad spectrum of possibilities, really.
Yeah. So basically, yeah, these are excellent examples. Basically, anything that allows you to share who you are, right? So looking at identity, what's important to you in terms of values. Often the best way to demonstrate that is, right, action. Actions always speak louder than words. So demonstrating patterns of behavior can be a powerful way to accomplish that. I like the idea of family adventures. That's family background or adversity that you've overcome with your family. Grade trends, that would depend. Depending on the question, if they ask something like, what's the most challenging thing that you've encountered, right, that might not be the best example. You might want to find something more challenging or something that covers more of who you are as a person instead of just as a student. Living abroad can be a wonderful one. Overcoming medical adversities, that would work, but you have to be careful that your essay doesn't sound more like a patient history, right? So make sure you strike that balance of personal and professional information. Financial difficulties, overcoming those, that it would be an excellent example of adversity. Cultural background, absolutely. And living in under third world or underdeveloped countries, yeah, that would work. Those all sound like fantastic ideas. So the next type of question that you'll often encounter will be, why them, right? Why do you want to go to their school? So Cornell has one of the briefest questions that I've seen for medical school applications, which is in 3 words, why our school, right? It doesn't get briefer than that, right?
Well, I actually mentioned to you that Stanford Business School has why Stanford.
That's even better.
Yeah.
Even better. That's awesome. So what they want to know here is how much you know about them and what's important to them. So you've got to do your research on these, and you want to spend some time doing it so that you come across in those essays as being knowledgeable and enthusiastic about their school and dedicated. So for those of you listening, what are some ways that you're going to learn more about the school?
In the question window, please. How do you intend to research the schools? School website, good. Speak to alumni, good. Mission statement, excellent. MSAR, good. Talk to past students. Mission and vision, open houses, reading more on their website. Accepted. Yay!
Yeah.
Visit campus tour. Find out their curriculum through their website. Very good. Emailing admissions committee. I would use that only if you had a really good question that wasn't answered on the website.
Yeah, be careful with that one.
Yeah, exactly. Specific activities that the school participates in and also are offered to applicants. Okay, good.
I love these. These are fantastic.
Yeah.
There's only a couple more I would add, actually. This is a really complete, comprehensive list. Thank you, everybody. Website, yes. Alumni, fantastic idea. Mission statement, yeah, don't miss the obvious, right? Mission statement, values. Even looking at the curriculum is helpful, right? MSAR, yes. Open house. Visiting the school is one of the best things you can do. And in the spreadsheet that I've provided that'll be posted on our blog in a day or two, I've included space for you to put the date that you visited the campus. You should absolutely plan on visiting all the schools nearest you, right? There's no reason not to if you live within an hour or two even. Obviously, if the schools across the country where you're not going to visit unless you really, really, really love what they have to offer. But it's much easier to write secondary application essays if you've been to the school and you have some kind of personal connection, or even having family in the area and visiting family, an hour or two away from the school. Even being able to share something like that, having some kind of a connection to the state, is better than nothing. Accepted.com, yes, we have lots of helpful information on our website. Campus tours, yes, yes, yes. Curriculum, absolutely. And again, as Linda mentioned, it's not a great idea to email the admissions committee unless you have a very difficult to answer question. But chances are your pre-health advisor, or we could probably answer that question for you. But I would only contact the admissions committee if you have something unique and something only they could answer that you can't find anywhere else on the website, on the WAMC website, through your pre-health advisor, through your medical admissions consultant. So a couple things I want to have you add to your list is to join their social media. So often schools will post awards that they've received. They'll post news about publications or research articles or breakthroughs. And they'll even include events. And it can be helpful just to kind of keep an eye on what's going on their campus, especially as you're preparing your application. Another thing to do would be to make sure you go to all pre-med fairs. I don't think that was mentioned. So pre-med fairs are great. And I just had a student last week go to one, and she came back, or she came into her appointment so excited because she had talked to so many different reps from so many schools that she was applying to. And she was thrilled that she got to meet with so many people from so many different schools in one location. So pre-med fairs can be an easy way for you to make contact with medical schools that are across the country or further away. Of course, campus events, as someone mentioned. Networking. So you'd be surprised, but talk to your mentors, talk to the doctors, the medical students, anybody else you know or you work with, because you'll often be surprised by how small the medical community is, and how, you never know, maybe one mentor went to a school, they can put in a good word for you, or they'll be able to tell you a lot more about the program because they went there. So start talking to everyone around you to find out, if they know more about the schools that you're interested in. So thank you for those ideas. So next we're going to talk about your strategy on this type of secondary question. So taking the time to do the research will make it much easier to write these essays. Visiting the school, right, you're going to have a lot more to say. And then, making sure you track down any personal connections to the state, the area, the type of medicine that they may specialize in or special programs. That will be very helpful. So demonstrate how much research you've done. You want to show off in this essay. And you want to establish, right, the clear understanding of what they offer and show them that you know, right, as much as possible about them. So you also want to demonstrate how what they offer will help you reach your career goals. So since space is often limited for these essays, you want to keep it focused and select only the most relevant and most important reasons why you want to attend their school, right? So you don't want to be writing about how great the tater tots were in the cafeteria, right? So make sure that you create a list of ideas. You check off the weakest ideas and only use, the top 5, 10 strongest, depending on the length of the essay. So for those of you listening, what are some things you could include?
What would you include? Unique aspects of the curriculum. Good. Special rotations they offer. That would kind of go along with unique aspects of the curriculum. Good. Anybody else? Location. Certain types of community involvement programs that the school does or requires of students. What makes them stand out from other schools? Community outreach, early clinical exposure. Comparing my interest to the special community service activities that they offer. Excellent. Anybody else? Attended the same school for undergrad. Not sure about that one. Their medical focus. Teaching, lecturing style. Could be research.
That's a good one, actually. That's a really good one. That's a good one. Yeah, these are all fantastic. So make sure that you use the specific names of programs, right? And see if you can go out of your way and do some super sleuthing and find out more than is just on the website. So if you can find out about, right, any special research interests you have that might align with what they offer, finding out through alumni or people who have gone to the school or worked at the school or friends who are currently medical students at the school, find out, inside information about special opportunities or community service activities. So the more you can find out, the better. Ideally, right, you would keep, keep track of this data, right, as you go through school selection and when you're reading the MSAR, right, you could use a notebook and jot down ideas or things you're learning about each school as you go through each part of the process so that it's not so overwhelming when it comes to, right, secondaries. You could already be on their social media, regularly getting updates. So you might sort of be increasing your knowledge over time so that when it comes time to write this essay, it'll be easy because, you'll already have lots of ideas and lots of information to work with. So some things I've seen be successful in the past are, of course, showing a lot of enthusiasm, and there are many, many successful ways to do that. Demonstrating knowledge of special programs using names, but across multiple different areas. You don't want to just throw out one name of a program and be done, right? That would be very superficial. So you want to go into much more detail than that. Other things that students have done have been to get specific about what tracks they want to study on in their curriculum. They've aligned why they learn best in the type of teaching or structure of the curriculum that they offer. So showing examples in the past of how they've done well or excelled in small group learning, things like that, or case-based studying, right? So there are many ways to approach these questions successfully, but just make sure you're honest in choosing the things you're most excited about, and then strategic and going, right, that extra mile to demonstrate to them how excited you are about their program and how much you know about what they offer. Right? You want to show that you know what you're getting yourself into, right? In the very least. The third kind of question you're going to see on secondaries will be essay questions about you and them. So if you can imagine a Venn diagram, this is going to be, right, these essays are going to be the space in between those two circles. So a good example of this type of question will be, how will you enhance the diversity on our campus, right? You and them. So these questions require that you balance enough details about you with, right, how much you know about their campus, and then how you would fit in there. So the best strategy I can offer you is for you to sit down and make a long list of your unique qualities, talents, skills, activities, experiences, achievements. The longer, the better. And if that's difficult for you to do, right, that's another reason why working with someone like me or my colleagues at accepted.com is such a fantastic idea, because we get to ask you lots of questions, sit down, help you make an outline, advise you on which are the best ideas to use, and which maybe wouldn't work out as well. So after you've got your list, you'll cross out those items that you've already included in the personal statement, right? You don't want to duplicate different parts of the application, and you'll identify your top 3 on the list as they relate to the school's mission and goals, and explain how those 3 identifiers will allow you to connect with the community and how they represent you as an individual. So it's a lot of looking at, past behaviors, activities, events, talents, skills, how things about you align with their mission, goals, curriculum. So any questions before we continue on?
So I think going back to before the old set of questions, Missy asks, do you have to do Casper for each school that asks for it, or do you complete it once and forward it to schools who want it?
Yeah, the second one. So you take Casper once, and then you designate which schools will you want to receive the score. So you only take Casper once, and then the scores are forwarded to all the schools you want to go to.
Another question on the Casper. Should you register for Casper before you receive the secondary if you know the schools you're applying to require it, or should you wait?
It's up, obviously it's up to you. If you know that the schools are going to require it, you could preemptively set up a date to take it. I think that would be totally up to you.
All right. Zoe asked, should you visit the medical school or just the school? I guess I'm not quite sure what he's at. Do many medical schools give tours?
Yeah, so that will tell you a lot about the culture of the school, right? Whether they have an annual event, whether they do set up tours, or whether they have a set number they do throughout the year, certain months of the year. That will tell you a lot about the school. So the way you can find out is to first go to their website. If there's nothing about visiting the campus, then it would be appropriate for you to call, right? In that case, if there's nothing on social media, nothing on the website, then you could call to find out if that's possible. There are some schools who won't set them up, but there are many that do. So again, that'll tell you a lot about the culture of the school.
Okay, and here's another one, and then I think we'll move on. If a school asks about what area of medicine you are interested in a secondary application, and you want a certain specialty, but the school is very geared towards primary care, how do you handle it? How do you recommend they handle it?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
Sure. If a school asks about what area of medicine you are interested in, and you want a certain specialty, but the school is very geared towards primary care, how should you handle it?
I think you should be honest. What's your take, Linda? I think you should be honest.
I think you should be honest, and you may also want to consider programs that are not so primary care oriented. Obviously, if it's your state school and there's only one school in your state, you're a little bit more limited in that regard. But even if schools are primary care oriented, they they have specialties and they prepare people for different specialties. The other thing is you possibly say, well, I'm considering one of the primary care specialties or whatever advanced specialty that is attracting your attention. That way you're kind of fudging your bets a bit.
But all schools are going to give you exposure to specialties through your rotation. there's different structures, right? You'll have, the traditional structure is, like 2 years of classes, and then you start, 2 years of rotations in your third year, right? The third and fourth year rotation. But other, now there's all different kinds of programs where students start rotations or start patients, working with patients in the first block, right? There's all kinds of different variations now on that structure. So you're going to get exposure to all of the major specialties through your rotations, and that's offered on every medical school campus. So I think it would be best for you to be honest. They,
Okay.
they are anticipating a shortage of primary care physicians, so I think, yeah, you're probably seeing, right, that push to encourage people to go into primary care, but you're going to have access to most of the major specialties through your rotations at most medical schools.
All right. I think we should move on and then take some more questions at the end. Okay, Alicia?
Yep. So the
Okay.
next step, if all goes well, right, if you survive your secondaries, you may be invited to interview anytime between August and April. So the earliest interviews can be, August, and then it can go all the way till April. So depending on when you, of course, submitted your AMCAS primary application and the schools you're applying to, rolling admissions begins around October and ends as late as August. And most medical schools begin classes between July and September, and I've had students accepted weeks and even days before school begins. I'll never forget, 4 years ago now, a student who called sobbing, I think it was like in September, and I was certain that she had gotten a rejection, right? I absolutely adored her, and it was just an honor to work with her. And I was devastated, right? Here she's calling and just sobbing, and I just felt so bad for her. And she paused and caught her breath, and she goes, "I just got in." Right? Like I think it was like 2 or 3 days before classes began. And so it happens, right? It can happen that you can get in weeks, days before school begins. So if you're on the wait list, don't give up hope. If you can find out what number you are, that's helpful, right? If you're, in the top 5, chances are you're most likely going to get in eventually. But don't lose hope, right? It's not over until it's over. Right?
Okay. Thanks, Alicia, for the excellent presentation and all the great advice. We're going to take your questions in just a couple of minutes. Before we do that, I wanted to speak with you for just a bit. Let's face it, it's hard to get accepted to medical school. That's just the reality of the situation. You can see the data on the screen. Overall, 41% accepted rate for MD programs, almost 35% for DO programs. This is data provided from AAMC and AACOMAS. Now, in the last 50 minutes or so, Alicia has given you the what and why of responding well to secondary applications. But the how of applying her excellent advice to your specific situation, your qualifications, your goals, your experiences, that how begs for individual advising from experienced professionals who can guide you through the lengthy, grueling process that is medical school admissions. And that individual advising, as you'll see in a moment, is a key factor not only in applying successfully, but also applying confidently. And that's your goal now, to apply successfully and confidently. Given the complexity of the application process and the odds, you need a mentor who knows the process inside and out and who can support you through this demanding journey. You need Accepted to be your guide. With Accepted, you can access professional expert advice, experience, objectivity. You can save time, apply with confidence, as I mentioned, and apply successfully. Most of our clients, overwhelming majority, are accepted. We have the admissions experts, the guides, who can mentor you through the process so that you achieve your goal of applying confidently and successfully. Former admissions directors, staff members, post-bac program directors like Alicia, who have been on the other side of the process and who can be your guide through this, this whole multi-step path that you're going down. Here's what you should do. 1, visit accepted.com/secondary. 2, choose the service that's right for you. 3, get the guidance that you need. And then 4, as I've said before, apply confidently and confidently and effectively. Some of you may say, isn't accepted expensive? Well, frankly, so is rejection. Our fees are really clear, but the cost of rejection is not quite as obvious, even though it can be significantly higher, multiples of our fees. So let's take a look at the risks of not applying with accepted. The cost of reapplication can easily be several $1,000s. Additional year of reduced pre-physician earnings, that can be in the 5 figures. Potential that you could have gotten into a better program with higher lifetime earnings, and that's probably a little iffier. Now, your minimum investment with accepted is $315, and an existing client secondary package, some of you are existing clients, some of you are not, is $37.90. For new clients, it's somewhat higher. Every year, we work with clients who talked to us a year earlier and decided, after taking the do-it-yourself approach and getting rejected, to work with us this time around. They would have been better off working with us initially, and so would you. But enough from me. What do accepted clients say? Hi, Mrs. Namankar. I do apologize for the lag in my response. It's evidence that I am very busy because I am a med student. I was offered 4 interviews total and was accepted to 2 schools. I chose to attend UCF COM in Orlando. I'm eternally grateful to you for all the critical advice and help you gave. I could not have made it through the application process without your help. Or the one on the right. I'm not reading everything here. My experience working with Alicia was amazing. She was knowledgeable and guided me through all steps of the process. The turnaround time for editing my secondaries was very short and allowed me to really push ahead in having my applications out earlier. The interview prep was important because it opened my eyes to the types of questions that could be asked and really prepared me to respond to those questions in a way that would demonstrate my best qualities. I would highly recommend using Alicia for the application process. Now, Alicia, as she's demonstrated here, is a wonderful, skilled, talented consultant who really cares about her client's success. But there's only one of her, and she does book up. I don't want you to think that we don't have other talented experts on staff, so here's a little more feedback. I feel very lucky to work with Dr. Gordon during the last application cycle. Dr. Gordon has been very responsible in editing my secondaries and preparing me for interviews. I still remember Dr. Gordon and I spent 7 or 8 drafts just on one 250-word secondary essay, which I believe played a huge role in my acceptance to that medical school. This client was accepted to Northwestern, Emory, University of Michigan, and UCLA. With the one on the right, Dr. Newman, this is absolutely impressive. I cannot be happier today. Thank you so much for adding that excitement that I felt but could not convey in my text. Or the last one on the bottom. Jessica really helped me with writing my personal statement. With her help, I was able to better prepare myself for my secondary applications and later interviews. Now I will be starting medical school in the fall. Now we'd love to help you as we help the authors of these comments, and thousands of others over the last 20 years. So once again, this is what I recommend you do to follow up to today's webinar. Visit accepted.com/secondary, choose the service that's right for you, get the guidance that you need, and go from confusion to clarity, doubts to confidence. Oh yes, and the special offer I told you about at the beginning, $100 off any order over $1,250. This allows you to also purchase our hourly plans. Coupon code SUCCESS, and this ends July 13th, 2018. Here's the URL. So you have all that information, and now it's time for your questions. And let's go back here. All right, so is there anything reapplicants in particular should do or address in the secondary application, especially when it comes to the is there anything else question, I guess the additional information question. Alicia, you want to take that?
Yeah, so if they don't ask for updates in another essay on that same secondary, that would be a place where you could provide updates. If they haven't asked you about being a reapplicant, that's a place where you could demonstrate how much you've improved by identifying all the things that you've done to become a better applicant.
Okay. Okay, Patrick is asking, can I listen to this webinar again later? Yes, we have recorded it. I think the recording worked also. We'll be sending out an email to all of you letting you know when the recording is available. Thank you. How would you be able to find pre-med fairs as a post-grad, and as you've graduated already?
Yeah, so I'm sure that there's a listserv or an alumni listserv you could join through your pre-health office. Um, there's You can join the social media of the medical schools nearest you to stay ahead of any events going on around you. But I would say your pre-health office would be a good resource. Joining social media for the schools. What's that?
What about AMSA, American Medical Student Association?
Yeah, AMSA. Yep, AMSA can be an excellent organization. Yeah, so I mean, I think if you start looking around at, listservs you could join, or if there are any clubs that you were formerly a member of, if you could still stay on the listserv, right? That's definitely a way you could stay ahead of those events.
All right. Here's a really good question. When the secondary asks for meaningful experiences, do you recommend writing about the same ones that you listed on your primary as meaningful, or should I pick other activities to highlight? It's an excellent question.
Yeah, I know I have a lot of students working on those right now.
Yeah.
And they're so irritated because they're like, I already wrote about this in my primary, right? And you just have to kind of go, well, they're asking about it again. Usually they're asking with a much smaller character limit, I'm seeing. Or if it's a larger character limit, right, that would be an opportunity to cover something different. So you never want to copy paste from the primary applications, right? That's not going to help. So even if you are covering the same activities, at least covered from a different angle, or maybe cover things that you've done most recently that you couldn't include in the application, the primary.
Okay, sounds good. Once you submit this is from Sophia, once you submit your secondary within 2 weeks, will schools consider you complete because there is an old MCAT score, even though you are awaiting a new MCAT score? This is somewhat related to a question you already answered, but it's a little different twist on it.
Yeah, so the policies are different for each medical school. So some schools will, just use your previous MCAT and move it forward if your anticipated, score date is way off or way later, or the schools will put your application aside until they have the new score. So it all depends on the policies at the individual school. And sometimes that comes down to the policies within each individual selection committee, right? Each person brings something different to the selection committee, right? One person will be all about the activities. Another person will be all about the GPA trends. Another person will be focused on the letters of recommendation. And so the decisions made in a selection committee, right, depend on the individuals within that group, what their focus is, and then what they as a group decide. So, it comes down to the policies at individual schools, but even within the selection committee that gets your application to review.
Okay. Megan asks, is it acceptable to leave an optional? Is there anything else? Question blank if you feel that everything in your primary, secondary has basically presented you.
Yeah, it's not a good idea to leave anything blank, right? It's just, it's not a good approach. There's definitely something you could write about. And that's something that I love helping students with, is looking at the strategy. It's actually, I think, a lot of fun because, right, we'll look at all the different questions within a secondary and strategically look at, okay, what could they cover for each one that would help them best answer the questions, but also to shine. And so there is always something you could include. I've never not been able to find, to help an applicant find something to use. So
think of the application like a puzzle piece. Now, part of the puzzle piece is already in. They're like the outside. That's the primary, right? But when you come to the secondary, you're adding pieces to the puzzle. I once got my kids and grandkids once went away on vacation, and we got a puzzle, and it was like the big pieces were on the left, and as you moved on to the right of this puzzle, the pieces got smaller and smaller and more intricate. So basically the younger kids were working on the left side of the puzzle, and my eldest son, who's very, very good at puzzles, was working on the right side because he wanted the challenge of it. But it's kind of like the primary is the big, or either the border on the puzzle, or the left side of the puzzle. In the case of this puzzle I just described, and the secondaries and the interviews are what you get as you move across. But it's all supposed to fit in and fill in the picture. So you're all very talented people, or you wouldn't be even thinking of applying to medical school. And most of you have done many different things. So it's very hard to believe that you've fully presented yourself, and you're a multidimensional human being. Human beings are incredibly complex. That there isn't something else that you want to let the admissions committee know about, or that the admissions committee would find valuable to know about you, that if you strategize properly, keeping in mind my puzzle analogy, you would want to use the additional information section for. All right, let's go on. Okay, so Sherry has an interesting question. If I work with Accepted and only have 2 weeks to submit my secondaries, would my consultant get back to me fast enough for all the secondaries that are coming in?
So I usually schedule appointments within a day or two of receiving. So I respond to all emails usually within 24 hours or less, usually less, during business days. And then, I'm able to schedule clients within a day or two of receiving their request, depending on their availability. And then usually, right, it takes an appointment or to complete, usually we get several secondary application essays outlined within one appointment. And then, as soon as you can return those to me, I can provide edits. And we have a 48-hour business day turnaround policy for regular. Yeah, 48 hours, right?
No, well, it's 2 business days, actually. It's not the same as 48 hours. It's 2 business days.
Okay. So we have 2 business days to return drafts if you purchase regular services, and we have 1 business day turnaround if you purchase rush prices.
Right.
So we're fast. I mean, I think we're fast, right, Linda?
Yeah.
I mean,
and
yeah.
You saw from the testimonials that they were very pleased. Let me go back to a couple of those slides. Dr. Gordon was very responsible in editing my secondaries. Where was a comment about turnaround? I was able to better prepare myself for secondary applications, later interviews. That's the bottom one. My experience working with Alicia was amazing. The turnaround time for editing my secondaries was very short and allowed me to really push ahead in having my applications out earlier. That's the one on the right.
And the thing too is that if a student works with me on their outlines, their first drafts are going to be amazing, and you're going to save time and money because there's not going to be this going back and forth trying to add missing content, like try to address complex issues through email. I prefer just to speak to clients right up front, and then if they want to read through drafts, I love doing that as well. Sometimes reading something out loud can make an enormous difference in the quality of the final draft. But it's a lot of fun. It's an opportunity to learn about yourself, and in 2 weeks, right, you could absolutely get your outlines done, have drafts edited multiple times in 2 weeks.
Yes, the big delay is when applicants do the writing. It's not our turnaround.
Usually that's the case. Okay. It takes people longer.
I think you're asking a great question. We can't stop you from procrastinating, but
I wish I had like a wand.
Yeah. So do I. Make life a lot easier. But we do provide this 2 business day turnaround with our regular rates and 1 business day with rush rates, and that should help you keep pushing through, plowing through. And again, if you look at the testimonials, you'll see that they were very happy with that. All right.
I think it helps. Sorry. I think it helps having an outline, because then you have direction. You know what you're going to write about, and I think it's just so much easier to get things done. And then also your skills as a writer improve. Like, I love it when I see my students improve their writing, right? I get to be basically a personal writing coach, right?
Right.
So I love it. Like, even this morning, noticing how students' writing is improving, and I get to point out to them, oh my goodness, look how quickly you turn this around, and look at how much your essays have improved and how little editing they require over time because the writing is getting better and better. So it's fun to see students progress and get excited about their writing, but then also to submit work that they're proud of.
Okay. Here are some more questions, and they're excellent questions. I know we're going over a little bit. I hope you guys don't mind. I assume if you're still here, you don't mind. But Kathleen asks, how should we prioritize secondaries other than time received?
Yeah, so obviously you have the best chance of getting accepted in the state where you currently reside, where you are a resident. So make sure, if you haven't already added all of the medical schools in your state, that you can always add them later on AMCAS. You can add more schools later, but apply to all the schools in your state. Those should be your priority, along with your top choices. For whatever reason, they may be your top choices, and then you could prioritize them based on time.
I'm going to chat now. This is something that Accepted put together based on AAMC data, and it basically shows you the different acceptance rates for in-state and out-of-state, and different medical schools. So obviously, if you are in-state and your school really favors in-state residents, not to mention having lower tuition for in-state residents, it's just a no-brainer to apply in-state. On the other hand, some states...
If you look at the stats, you're just more likely to get accepted. Yeah.
Yeah. So you may want to, take a look at that data afterwards. But that's a major factor. Definitely should be prioritized.
That was a good question, though. I like that question.
We're getting great questions this evening.
Yeah.
All right. This is a question from Fatima. Should we mention any visits to campus and talking to current students in secondaries, or save it for the interview?
Ooh, name dropping. How do you feel about that, Linda?
I think it really depends on the question.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, if they're asking, how did you learn about our program, then it's perfectly appropriate. If they're asking something about your past or something completely divorced from how you research the program, then no.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's see. What else do we have here? When updating your application, what other than new publications would you recommend? Would new activities be helpful?
Can you repeat it, please?
Yeah. When updating your application, is this for a reapplication, or is this just when submitting secondaries X weeks?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Can you, this is Benjamin, if you're there, that will.
Yeah, can you just make the question more specific?
Make it a little bit clearer. We have another one though. That's a good one. So he's responding to that. Should we address fit in all questions? This is for secondaries.
Again, it goes back to the question, right? I think it ultimately depends on the question. Because if the question is like, what has been the most challenging event in your life, and you're talking about like why you fitted their school, that would be weird, right?
Yeah.
So it wouldn't work. So it all comes down to the question. So it all depends on what they're asking you to do.
I'd just like to add something here, though, that certainly you have to respond to the question. That's number one. But I think the difference between the primary application and the secondary application is the secondary application, the point is fit with the individual schools. The primary has nothing to do with fit with schools. It's going to a bunch of schools. The secondary is all about fit with the schools. So if you are going to talk about, if you're applying to a program that's very clinically focused, then you should be focusing on your clinical experiences and your responses, and less, let's say, on research experience or something like that. So, well, absolutely, don't go on talking about your fit with the program if the question has nothing to do with it. Even the choices you make in the activities that you choose to talk about on questions that aren't about fit with the program should be reflecting your understanding of what that program is looking for and what you offer that is most attractive to that program. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I agree. That's absolutely true.
All right, now Benjamin added, sorry for the confusion, just for the update on secondaries, this is my first time applying. You're very welcome, Fatima.
Yeah, so can you read the full question? Sorry.
Sure. So no, that's fine. So Benjamin's first question was, when updating your application, what other than new publications would you recommend? Would new activities be helpful? And then the clarification was, just for the update on secondaries. This is my first time applying. So there's no reapplication involved. It's just what's happened.
It's just for secondaries, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Got it. Thank you so much for the additional information.
Yeah.
So what I often do with clients is we come up with a timeline, and I don't want to put all of you into a panic, right? You're probably all really already stressed out, but for each part of the cycle, right, from the primary to secondaries to the interview, right, to sending update emails, to, hopefully getting, a positive response or hearing back on your status. In each step of the application process, you want to go out and do something new. Even if that's running a 5K, a half marathon, a marathon, if it's, I have some students or one student in particular who just got runner-up in an art competition. I was so proud of her, right? But this is the time to maintain your sanity, to put your focus on other things in your life, but also to look at how during each step of the process, how you can look at gaining more experiences, achievements, publications, participating in competitions, taking your skills to the next level, whatever that may be. And that's also what I love doing with clients, is helping them see what the next thing may be, and that can vary, right? Depending on whether you are in music, poetry, whether you like art, if you're a photographer, right? If you like public speaking, there's always a way to expand your skills through, different organizations, through setting new goals for yourself, new achievements. So it's really fun we're like part life coaches to help people see how to further their development across multiple areas, not just getting more clinical experience, right? Maybe you do need more clinical depending on your activities, or, could be just further developing your skills. And you might be thinking, what does art have to do with medicine? But, I'll never forget a student who I worked with who was a portrait photographer and very talented. In fact, he traveled the world taking portraits of people across multiple cultures, and he did amazing work. And he ended up becoming an otolaryngology surgeon. And I'll never forget helping him with his residency personal statement in connecting his aesthetic eye and his appreciation for the human face to what he wanted to do, as an otolaryngology surgeon. So
we have a neighbor who's a radiologist, and his hobby, and he's very good at it, is photography.
Oh, how cool. Yeah. So, it helps. Like, it's important, just for your sanity, right? To have other interests, to be a balanced individual. And you'd be amazed at the ways that you can incorporate your passions into your career, right? Like the psychiatrist who incorporates music therapy into her research or studies. There's so many possibilities.
I interviewed, if you go to exhibit.com/listen-med, I think it's blog.exhibit.com. It's our podcast. There are several interviews with absolutely fascinating medical students. And one, whose name at the moment is, I think his name is escaping me, but he runs a travel company on the side. And he basically supported himself through med school by bartending. And when he went for his residency interviews, he talked about the similarities between being a doctor and being a bartender. And he said they just loved it. So,
I bet. Because it's a unique approach. It's interesting, right?
Yeah, obviously.
It's unusual.
He said people come to the bar and to doctor when they're in pain. and they frequently need somebody to listen to them.
Well, I have to say, like, one of the best personal statements I think I've helped a student with in recent history started, like, the entire first sentence was about peanut butter jelly sandwiches. I don't know if you remember it, Linda, or if you read
I
it.
don't remember it.
But it was amazing, and it was funny, and it was so interesting, and it was like how much he loved peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and of course there were connections to medicine, and that he volunteered and was able to see the importance, right, of food and health, and it ended up being a really gorgeous essay, but it was shockingly good. Like you wouldn't think a peanut butter and jelly sandwich would lead to an acceptance to medical school, but he got into several schools.
Well, another fellow I interviewed, I mean, you can see some sample essays on the site also, and there's tremendous variability in there. It's the I don't have the podcast number, but it was about medicinal magic and magical medicine. The fellow is a magician, and
how cool.
He even performed at the Magic Castle in Los Angeles for all you Angelinos on this call. He apparently was quite good at it, and he wrote about volunteering and starting to perform magic for children in the hospital, and how it, particularly one case, it distracted a child who was petrified of a surgery he was about to have. And he has started up a program to kind of introduce magic, to teach doctors and other healthcare professionals magic, especially in the pediatric area. But when he interviewed, he said all they really wanted to hear was his magic. I think he had to perform a few tricks. He always carries a deck of cards with him, and it was absolutely fascinating talking to him. So don't hesitate to talk about that. I also can remember working with a medical school client years ago, and I remember at what point, but at some point she came and she says, I'm actually on a master swim team, and I'd been working with her already for a while, and she suddenly come out telling me about this master swim team. It might have been, no, it wasn't her, that was somebody else. It was a client, a medical school applicant client who was waitlisted, and she came back and we'd been talking about update letters or whatever, letters of intent, and then she said to me something like, almost in passing, that she just started a business. And she told me about her business. I said, are you just keeping secrets from me? And she says, no, why? I didn't think they'd care. I didn't think they'd be interested. I said, of course they care. You're showing initiative. It requires organizational skills. It requires people skills. All these other activities that you do show qualities that you may not, you're kind of taking it for granted. So don't be afraid. Don't be so clinically focused. Yes, you need clinical exposure. No question. It's important. It's vital. But don't be afraid to pursue some of these other interests, whether it's jogging or photography or magic or bartending or whatever. Okay, they can be very, very useful from a medical school admissions perspective. Now, I want to, at this point, and we've gone over, I want to first of all thank Alicia again for the wonderful, wonderful presentation. I want to thank the participants, the visitors who are here today for your time, your answers, your questions, and your participation. I'd also like to share a couple of thoughts and a story before we part. Remember the advice that Alicia has given you about authenticity and timeliness, especially the 2-week turnaround time for your secondaries? Balance and steady effort, and so much more this evening. So if you're worried about churning out those secondary essays quickly while showing the fit necessary to snag interview invitations, not to mention prepping for the interviews themselves, and if you're anxious about spending the next year running this marathon, or almost a year, remember the excellent advice that Alicia has given you today and your goal. Apply successfully and confidently. Here's feedback from former clients and now med students who worked with Accepted. I've been thinking about this whole crazy process after being accepted to 3 medical schools, and I know that I wouldn't have had a prayer if it wasn't for your substantial help. They say the essays are one of the most important aspects of the application, especially for someone like me whose numbers are a little below average. You've helped me immeasurably. You greatly de-stressed an important part of the process that was making me quite anxious. I felt much more confident in my essays after working with you. Slightly low numbers, concern about the quality and quantity of writing you will have to do. That was this applicant's story. Can you relate? He dealt with his concerns by working with Accepted. He applied confidently and successfully. He is now a med student. You can be too. Get Accepted.